Hey everybody, wait for a few more people to get joined up and then we'll have some fun. All right, at least we got about almost 30 of you guys today, so we'll get started here in a moment. So hey everybody, welcome back to Mission Control for another lesson in Titan. Today we'll cover playbacks and the playback options and a couple other little things that we'll toss in there. Also, I hope everyone's again ready for the Mission Control drinking game, where every time I forget to switch screens, you take a drink. I'm ready today. It's just a soda, so it's not anything fun. But hopefully you guys are ready and we'll have a good old time. So Merlot goes with me, apparently. Thanks, Paul. So with that, let's go ahead and get started here today. So let's talk about playbacks. There are three types of playbacks in Titan: a queue, a queue list, or a chase. We're going to talk about queues today. Any of the three will have three record modes. Channel mode records only the attributes you have changed from the fixtures in the programmer. Does not record values taken from locate, because remember, over what we said the last few days, locate puts nothing in the programmer. Fixture mode stores all the attribute channels for all the fixtures in the programmer, regardless of whether you've changed all the attributes or not. Stage mode records all the channels for all patch fixtures which have a dimmer value of more than 0, regardless whether that information comes from the programmer or from other playbacks. It will record the output coming from the console. So, be careful if you're using stage mode and you're, say you're programming beforehand and you have house lights are controlled from the console and you record something in stage mode. And then you fire back your playback in the middle of the night and bunk, all the house lights come on. Or, your fog machine, which, was happened to be at 100% when you were recording that cue, and then you're have a whole lot of fog when you're not supposed to have fog. I have done that myself, so it's a lesson learned the hard way. Just remember to check haze machines, fog machines, house lights, and so get them recorded in stage mode. I won't say I never use stage mode, but I very rarely use stage mode. I know Gordon, our head trainer in the UK, thinks I'm crazy for not liking stage mode as much as he does, but I'm just not really my thing. Between channel mode and fixture mode, what do I use? It really depends on exactly what I'm trying to do at the moment. Do I need it to be just only the channels I have in the programmer, or do I want it to be the whole fixture at the time? It really depends on what I'm doing at the moment for which record mode is best. So updating playbacks and off. We talked about off yesterday, so we'll just talk about updating playbacks after we make some. So with that, let's go ahead and click on over to our interface over here. And again, I'm using the Titan 1 interface while connected to a mobile so that the Titan Go interface. Sometimes I'll get that right in my head. The Titan mobile connected just so I can use more universes as need be, and I can use the wheels to cheat to make things a little easier while I'm showing you guys stuff. So record a basic playback. Let me just make sure this is a show file. I think it is loaded. Yes, it is. So make a basic playback. We just go ahead and select our fixtures and give them a locate, and then we can give them a position, a color, And we'll give them a gobo on this one, and we'll reopen up capture so we can see it. And then we hit record. And from there, we can go through our different record modes on soft key A again, channel, fixture, stage, or quick build. We'll talk about quick build when we talk about cue lists later. If I record channel mode, it's only going to put what I have here in the programmer. So if I recorded this one channel mode and I recorded it here, and like the same playback, I'll hit record, change the record mode to fixture, and record it here. And now I'll hit clear on the programmer. And if I fire this first playback, it quote unquote doesn't work. But if I fire the second one, it does. Now, why is it this first one didn't work? Because when I recorded it in channel mode, I had no intensity in the programmer because locate puts nothing in the programmer. So that's the playback works. It's just there's no intensity on it, so you can't see it. So if we were to select those same fixtures and we tap the at button twice, it'll take whatever fixtures we have selected and put them at full intensity. So now we've got intensity in the programmer. So if we hit record, and we change the record mode back to channel, and then we hit the blue swap button on here, we can merge the playback in, or merge our programmer in, which again only had dimmer on it. And if we hit clear, and have this down all the way, and then bring the fader up, we can see that now we have intensity working. Or, the playback, quote unquote, seems to work because we now have recorded intensity into it. What would have happened if we had just used replace instead of merge when we recorded it? What that would have done is only put dimmer in the programmer, or would only put dimmer on that playback, and would have taken all the other attributes out. So we would have lost the gobo, the color, and the position. It only would have controlled dimmer from that point on. I hope that makes sense for everyone. So let's talk about, so let's play around with these playbacks a little bit here more. Let's say that this playback is great and all, but I don't like the color. I could select my fixtures, change the color, record, check my record mode, and then click it and merge. Now I've got that color in the in it instead. I could also, if I viewed the playback like we've been looking at, I can then view the cue. And let's say I wanted to change the gobo, for instance. Let's go to gobo wheel 1. Instead of it on gobo 3, I can change it to gobo 8. And now if I close this and close this so we can see capture, we can see that we're now on gobo 8 for this playback instead of gobo 2 like it was on that one. Let me see that it changes. So you change it either way. If we want to, let's talk about actually any questions on that so far, just so that I don't get myself too far behind. Hey there, Lee. Nice of you to join us today. Nice to see you, as well as Sam and Randall, and see who else we got. Kenny there joining us, and Saif. Nice to see you again, and Mr. Tim also. Nice to see a lot of you guys here. So since we don't seem to have any questions at this point, we'll continue on, and let's talk about include. So say that we have our playback that we had on Fader 2, and we'll switch back to the other screen here in a moment. We like everything about it, but we want to change something of it in the programmer easily. So what we can do is switch back to our interface here. If we hit the include key, and then we hit the blue key of one of our playbacks, you'll see that it takes all the information that was in that playback and pulls it into the programmer. Since that one was recorded in fixture mode, we see we have intensity and position and color and gobo, beams, effect, special, everything has been recorded into this playback. So if we hit clear and we include on our other playback, we see that it only has intensity, position, color, and gobo, because again, that was recorded in channel mode. And the only things we ever put in the playback were intensity, position, color, and gobo. So that's why that's the only thing we see. In the programmer here when we use include. So basically what include does is it takes a playback and just pulls it all back into the programmer, so you can then manipulate it again. So like I said, we'll do, if we include and we select this one, we can see it pulls everything into the programmer. We can then change it. We'll maybe use this color palette instead, or maybe this one. I think we'll use that one today. We use that, and then say we want it to be a different gobo or maybe no gobo, so we'll just go to open. Oops, that's not the strobe, sorry. Go to open here, so we've got an open gobo. And then we can record that to a new playback if we wanted. So now we've got this playback with all those things in it. Hope that makes sense. Chris, I'm not exactly sure what you mean by your question. Why don't I say just update color and then click merge? What do you mean exactly? Sorry. And hello, Austin. Sorry. Well, what do you mean, Stephen, by the playbacks palettes? Do you mean the playbacks workspace? As in this? And yes, we can include from here. I don't know why I bother to do it all that way, but see, yes, we can include it from there, from the playbacks workspace. Okay. Just wasn't sure if that's what you meant was the workspace or it was something else that I wasn't quite tracking. If one thing, Chris, if I'm trying to understand it, basically it was just another way to do it. Again, I could just select the fixtures, change the color, record, select where I wanted, what I wanted, and then merge it in that way. I was just showing another way to do it with the playback view, if that's all that you meant. There's Mr. Sam giving a more in-depth answer that helps out there, Chris. So let's talk about copy and linking playbacks. Copy just makes a copy of a playback so that if we switch back to our other screen, if we were to just hit I wanted an exact copy of this playback here on playback to, we'll actually do the one that's active. I wanted this copy of this one here, but on page 5, let's say. So I can hit copy, then hit the blue key on the one that I wanted, go and change my page to page 5, and then we'll put it on fader 1. So now on page 1, I've got this fader here, and if I drop it, it goes down. Oops, and my lights were not on that. So if I go back to page 5 now, I have the same playback here. So it's the same, it's a copy of the same playback now in 2 separate places. Also what you can do is called link, which is a link will be linked to the original. It means that if you update the contents of the original playback, all the linked ones will be updated also. So let's show how that works. So if we hit copy and switch back screens, we hit copy and then we hit on our soft key F here where it says link. Go ahead and click on that. And then choose the playback we want to copy. We'll link. Actually, let's go back to page 1. We'll do a different one. We'll do this one. And just to show it easier, rather than changing pages, we'll just put a copy of it here. So this could be on page, 25 instead of on page, also on page 1. So we see if we fire this one, we get that look. And it's the same thing here. Now let's say that I needed to update the position on this one because it wasn't right. Let me move this over here out of the way for a moment. There we go, get all these, drop all the way down. So we'll go and select our fixtures, and we'll fire this playback so we can see it. Then we'll change the position to this one, and then we'll record here and merge, and then we'll hit clear, and we'll drop this playback and see that it's recorded that position in there now. But if I go to this one, golly, why are you being such a pain? There we go. If we go to this one here, we can see the position has also changed, because they are linked. So if you update one, it updates the other one. Now, if I did that to here, right, if we change the position palette on this, or change the position on this one, and we'll change it to, whoops, that's what it was, change it to this one, record here, merge. If I hit clear, test just to make sure. If I go to page 5 and bring up playback 1, we can see that the position did not change in that one because that was just a copy of it, not a linked copy. Is that making sense to everyone? Correct. If you're just using include to pull stuff into the programmer, at that point, all you've done is pulled what was in there at the time into the programmer. If you change the palettes that you'd used, that would, if you made the original playback with palettes and you included it, and then you updated you recorded that as another playback, and then updated the palettes that were used from the original one, yes, it would update the last one. And sorry, support call came through. Hopefully Mr. Brad will be able to answer that. Does that make sense there, David? So let's see what our next slide is. Give me a direction to go. So let's talk about the playback view. We've looked at it a little bit here and there, but we actually focused on it. So let's switch back over to our mobile display, and we'll go back to page 1 of our faders, just because there's a few of them here. And we can do we could do playback options and click one, or we could do or for we're going through here. Sorry, we could click view and then the blue button of the playback we wanted to view, or we could do we could click just the area above the fader here if it's recorded on a fader and get the same view. And we'll talk about what we can see in here. Obviously, in this view to start with, we can see the delay in the fade in, the fade out, the fixture overlap, the curve, the effect speed, the view cue, view shape, view pixel map, or view pixel effect. So if we had a shape or a pixel map effect in here, we would see it here. View cue, just like we've been seeing, we can go and view what's in the cue itself. Effect speed, if we had any effects in here, we could give it a multiplier or a divisor, so we'd have it run twice as fast of the BPM, or 4 times as fast, or half speed, quarter speed, so on and so forth. Curve, you can change the way that the fader behave, the way it fades in through changing the curves. The curves can be seen in the manual. So you can see what each one does. Fixture overlap, just like we saw with doing palettes earlier this week, or was it last week? Time's getting a little funky here. I can't remember which. I think it was last week, actually. We can, instead of fixture overlap, to have our fixtures come in using the overlap. You can change the playback's fixture order in the same way. So if we were to click fixture overlap here, and then we look at our soft keys and we hit next, we can change our fixture order for this playback specifically. And changes its overlap percentage, obviously. Delay and a fade in, just like the sound, we have set a delay for it to come in, a delay for it to come in, fade out, same thing, as long as we change the mode, which we'll talk about in a minute. So since we have this view open, we'll talk about times here in a minute. Let's talk about the playback options. We'll go through everything we can see in here. And 1 second here, I'm going to change the way I've got two things going on. So stand by one moment or ask any questions if you have any. All right, sorry about that. I had to reorder some slides real quick. So let's talk about the playback options. Oops, it's getting a little cut off on your guys' screen, isn't it? Let's slide that up a little bit. That should help. Playback options, we can do it as we saw here. If we have the Q view up, we can simply click on the options tab on the left-hand side of the window, or if we close this, we can hit playback options and then select a playback and get the same window. We can also, as a version 11 plus, say we wanted to do more than one playback at a time in our optioning. What we can do is press and hold the first Q. Remember, right-click on the Titan Go interface to press and hold the key button, and then gotta turn playback options on, or hit the playback options soft key, and then press and hold our first key, and then the last one we want to edit. I'll do all of these at once, and see that it brings up the playback option. Now I'm editing it on all of those playbacks at the same time. So if you want to edit a whole bunch at one time, this is a quick, easy way to do that. So with that, let's go ahead and we'll talk about everything that's in the playback options. Set jobs for a queue or queue list, blah, blah, blah. We actually just saw how to do all this. So let's go through it. So we'll go down the options down the left-hand side of the playbacks window here, the playback options window here. We'll go through each section and talk about what each key can do. So under the playbacks tab, we've got blind. This sets the individual playback to blind mode. The playback will then only output to the visualizer and not to the stage. This can be useful if you need to program and test a cue during a live show. And we'll talk about blind in another stream. Priority. This allows you to configure how playbacks will behave if you turn on two playbacks controlling the same fixture. You've got low, normal, high, programmer, and very high. If you had something that's set to very high, you couldn't even adjust what was in that playback through the programmer. So say you had intensity in a playback and you had it set to very high, you couldn't even adjust it in the programmer. Whereas if you had something that was low priority, the programmer would be able to control those fixtures still. Shape behavior controls the behavior of keyframe shapes in this playback, actually any playback. Global uses the setting from user settings. The choices are in the shape behavior are global uses the setting from user settings. Overlay, shape continues to run over changes to the attributes. LTP, if the attributes are changed, the shape will stop running on those attributes. So a quick one on shapes. All shapes basically run around a center point. So if it's a circle, it's going to run around the center point of where the lights are pointing. If you change where the light was pointing, say you took your pan from 50% and put it to 80%, if it was on overlay, the circle would just be pointing over with this 80% pan as the center. If we used LPT, it would just, the shape would stop burning when you go point over there. A little hard to do without showing the hand motions I usually do on that one. Continuing in the playbacks tab, fader mode just sets the same option is set in the edit times menu, which actually usually I do these the opposite way around. We'll talk about them. Actually, we'll talk about it when we do edit times. So we'll talk about that in a little bit here. Run on startup sets this playback to run when the console power is on. This could be disabled by the auto run start playbacks option in the user settings. Be turned on is turned on by default. So let's say that you have a playback that anytime you turn on the console, you want to automatically fire. Say like the house lights, or maybe just a super basic stage wash of a couple of bar cans, so that when the cleaning crew comes in, or if you're like doing a house of worship where the younger kids may not know how to do it, or the older folks do for that matter. All you can tell them is all they have to do is just hit the power on the console. When it fires up, these lights will come on. You can do your thing, and then I can come, use the lighting guy, can come in a little bit later, and then actually run the show. Speed, you can set the speed of this playback in BPM. It can be overridden by a rate or BPM master. Flash fade in and flash fade out. Actually aren't showing on my slides here. Speed multiplier. Why is this not? What the heck? I apparently need to update my slides. Flash fade in, flash fade out sets the fade in and fade out time of this playback when used when firing the flash button. These are set to as in, as out, which will use the fade times set for the playback in the times menu. This option allows you to set a different flash action for the playback. You must use the timed flash key profile. So to make the timed flash in, flash out work, you have to specifically use the timed flash key profile. Crossfade HTTP, if on, which is it makes the HTTP channels dimmer. So the only thing that can be HTTP and dimmer, and in Titan is a dimmer channel. Is in this queue override other HTTP channels obeying their priority settings. So like yesterday when we talked about HTTP LTP, what you can basically do is, with this option on, you're essentially turning your HTTP values dimmer into LTP with obeying priority settings. So if we have a playback set to high priority and its dimmer is set at 50%, and you have a playback with normal priority at 100%, when you fire that playback with high priority to 50%, your lights are going to dim down to 50%. Now, it's just the obverse. If we had a playback, we had our lights at 50% on a normal or higher priority, and we fired a playback that had our fixtures going to 100% with a lower priority. When we fired that second playback, lights are still going to stay at 50% because it had the higher priority, and it would ignore the values. It would ignore the HTTP or dimmer channels from the lower playback. I hope that makes sense to everyone. The last one, loop action. If we happen to have a queue list, we set what happens at the end of the queue list. Stop on finding the queue. The queue list will stop advancing once it reaches the last queue, which is the default. Or the default is loop. The queue list will go back to the first queue after the last. If move and dark is enabled, this will also loop. Continuing on under the handle tab, handle paging allows you to lock the playback on the handle so it appears on that handle no matter what page is selected. This is useful if you have some general playbacks you want on every page. We'll have to copy every playback onto each page. The options under that are unlock playback will change with the pages as normal. Transparent lock the playback will appear on all pages when the handle is unprogrammed. Lock this playback will appear on all pages. Playback programmed on the handle on other pages will not be accessible. And we'll come back and talk about that here in a little more in 1 second. Key profile sets the key profile individually for this playback. Global sets the key profile back to the global settings for playbacks. We'll get into key profiles in another stream, I think, next week. Let's step back and talk about handle paging. So let's say you've got a playback that you always see you have a playback that appears on all pages. Now, I'm a very blinders happy guy, so if you don't like blinders, don't hire me to be your LD because you'll be very unhappy. I always put my blinders on fader 10 on most consoles, or if I'm on a Sapphire Touch, on fader 15, so it's the last fader on the page. And what I like to do is I only program it once, and then I set it to lock, so no matter what page I'm on, it will still be my blinders. I don't have to record it or copy it 20 times. I can just lock it on to handle 10 or 15, and then no matter what page I'm on, my blinders are always going to be there, and I can be happy and make things go flashy, because that's what I like to do. Now, for some reason, let's say that on the song that I have recorded on page 5, I need that extra fader there and not have blinders there. Fat chance that ever happening, but it could happen. So if that was to be the case, what I can do is I can set it to transparent lock. So when I got to page 5, it would then just show the Moles and strobes or get out. Exactly, Nigel. I could have that fader 10 be a different playback than it was instead of it being for my my audience abuse, right? Or unlocked just like it normally does. So we just change the page and it changes with the whatever faders aren't active at the time. Continuing onto the fader tab. Fader mode says same as the options set in the times menu. Again, we'll talk about that here in a minute. Shape size, I can talk, sets whether the fader position affects the size of shapes in this playback. The options are fixed, has no effect, faders, the size of all shapes set by the fader position, HDP fader, only dimmer shapes are controlled by fader position. We'll get into that more when we play with shapes and effects. Next one, shapes and effects, speed. Again, we can put speed to be controlled by the fader. I generally don't use these two options too much anymore. I pretty much put all of my shapes, size, and speed on masters and play with that. But your mileage may vary, whatever makes you happy. Curve, again, we can set the curve for it to have it instead of having a linear curve. You can change it for something that makes you happy. And again, the curves are listed in the manual. Continuing on to the effects tab, shape behavior, same as we just saw, whether it's globals, overlay, or LTP. Speed source, as long as you allocated speed master to this playback, so we can set it to be either our free run, which is just going to run as whatever recorded at. A local clock means we can set it to be something specific for that playback. We can get our rate masters 1, 2, 3, or 1 through 4, and our BPM masters 1 through 4, or up to 1 through 8 now as of version 13. Shape size, same as we just saw, and same with shape and effect speed, like we just saw in the last one. And again, we'll talk more about that when we do shapes. And our last tab would be the release tab. Release mask allows you to specify which attributes were released to the stage they were in from previously fired playback. When this playback is killed, you lower the fader to 0. You can also use the attribute bank buttons to set the mask. The mask is set, can be set to global or local. Local means you can make individual mask settings for this playback. Global uses the global release mask, which is set in the release menu. We press release time. We'll come back and talk more about release mask in a second. Release time sets a release fade time for this playback. Entering blank time to return back to the global settings. Global release time is set in user settings, which has a default of 2 seconds. If we had a queue list here, we would see release queue. After each step, fixtures which are no longer affected are released, and we'll maybe come back to that and talk about it when we get to queue lists in a few days, I believe. So let's talk more about release mask. So release mask, let's say that actually here, rather than talk about it, let's just show it. So we're going to exit out of here. Let's make a playback here. So we'll have we'll select our BMFLs and we'll throw a locate on them, and we'll point them out into the face of our crowd and us, and then we'll go into its intensity, and we'll make it stroby. Actually, we'll go to random strobe. So it gets a little funky there. There we go, something like that. So then I want that, and we're going to hit record it, and record it to this fader here. Oops, what record mode was in? I'm going to change that to fixture mode and redo that. Record here and replace. Now we'll hit clear. So we see that if I fire this playback, fixtures start flashing and strobing. Hit the flash button, we get the same thing. So if I had this playback running, or let's do this one, and I hit flash on this playback, our fixtures go to this position and strobe, and when I let it go, they stay in that because the release mask is not set to anything, and I've not set the fader to mode 2. We'll talk about mode 2 in a minute when we get to edit times. But so let's say I wanted that, and when I stopped holding the flash button, I wanted it to go back to this playback. Well, I do playback options, select this playback, go to the release tab. I'll do it over here, and set my release mask instead of global. I can change it to local, and then I'd want it to include intensity, pan and tilt, and color. So intensity would be for my strobe, pan and tilt would be for the position I put it in, and color would be, since we made it go to open white, and actually we can, the gobo also. We'll just include everything since we recorded that in fixture mode. And we hit exit. So, and actually, whoops, let's open that. Let's change our release time from global. Let's set it to 0.5. And I'll do a half second. I think that might work out. I mean, I hate that and go back and do a 0.1. So now when I hit the flash button on this playback, you see it goes to our strobe. When I let it go, they go back to doing what they were doing before. If I didn't like that half second fade that it does on the fade out, I could, whoops, I hit the latch button, didn't I? Why are you staying on? No, not the fader. So strobe, when I let it go, it goes back to what I was doing. I didn't like that fade time. I set it to a 0 fade time or a longer one if I wanted it to come down slowly from it. Now, you could have done that also with mode 2, but we'll talk about mode 2 when we get to there. So I know everyone's going to say it, but mode 2. We'll play with that in a little while, though. So you see with the release mask there, I can get it. So when I have it, release it back to whatever it was doing before, basically, is what the release mask is going to allow you to do. And it would work still with the fader. If I brought the fader up and brought the fader down, we can see that it goes back to whatever it was doing before. We could use a different playback. We could use this one instead, and then fire this one, and see that we get our strobe, and then back to our not strobe. And we'll pause for a minute while I try to get Kat up on questions, since it seems to be a lot of stuff has been said. If I deselected the release mask, would it go back to the original? Not exactly sure what you mean there, sir. Do you mean if we see here? We're still on that one. If I was to playback options here, go to release. If I turn them off on all of these, so the local mask now includes nothing in it. If I flash this, when I stop flashing it, it still stays strobing and no color and in that position because it isn't releasing anything. It's now just staying on that playback. Because remember, LTP applies here. So as long the fixtures are going to do whatever we told them to do last, unless we tell them to do something different. So basically, release mask says, "Hey, stop doing this playback and go back to doing what you were doing before." Does that make sense? Uh, yes and no, Stephen. Kind of a loaded question there, but we'll talk about that. Ask that question again when we're doing playlists, or excuse me, cue lists, and we'll go from there. So I promise you we'll talk about mode 2 here in a minute and why at times release mask is better, but we'll get to that in a minute. So let's talk about the edit times menu and everything we can see in there. If we switch back to our mobile display, if we hit edit times and then select one of our playbacks by hitting its blue button, we can see that this menu comes up on the screen, as well as options on our soft keys. We're going to go through the soft keys and talk about everything that's on there real quick. Delay in sets the delay in time for all fixtures. We call this the global delay. Fade in sets the fade in time for all fixtures. We call this the global fade in. So if we wanted it to, wait 1 second after we brought the fader up to start, we can set a delay of 1 second, and then we want our fade in time, how fast we want it to fade in, whether, a quarter of a second, 1 second, 10 seconds. The 10-second fade is forever. Fade out, this sets the fade out time of all fixtures. By default, this is disabled. You have manual control of HTP fade out on the fader. LTP channels remain as set in the queue. And that has to do with the mode we have the playback in, which we get to in 1 more minute, I swear. Fixture overlap, again, we can set the fixture overlap percentage of the queue, just like we saw in palettes in the earlier lessons. We can set an overlap here. If we hit the previous, or actually you guys don't have to hit previous or next yet. Fade mode determines how the times and channels behave in a queue. We'll come back to that in 1 second. We'll get through everything else here. Flash times allows you at a different at a time to use your blue swap button as a flash, actually your gray button by default. But again, for flash times to work, you have to set the timed flash key profile. Flash times, group attribute times, this lets you set timings for groups of channels, i.e. color or position. You can also get to this directly by pressing the color or position button while in edit times. And fixture order, we can change the fixture order of the queue. Let's step back and talk about, let me see what the next slide is real quick, just so I can make sure. Yes, it is what I thought it was. Okay. Group attribute times, let's talk about that for a quick second. This lets you set timings for different, for groups of channels, i.e. color or position. You can also get directly by pressing the color or position button while in edit times. Let's say that you want to play back when you fired it, the fader or the dimmer faded in half a second, but the movement takes 5 seconds and the color takes 10 seconds. So with the group attribute times we can have is we can set that's our intensity channels fade up in a half second, and our position change would take 5 seconds, and our color change would take 10 seconds. Simply by doing that, we can hit the, while we're in the edit times menu as we are, we can hit the P here for position, and I can set a delay or fade time for that that group of channels for color, or I can do it on individual. And up there's the first time we got a drink because I didn't switch the screen. We knew it was going to happen at least once. So let me just go ahead and exit out all this real quick just to show you guys. So playback options here. I'm sorry, not playback options, edit times, my bad. Edit times, select the playback we want to edit the time on. And actually, I don't want to use this one here. I want to show a different one for a better one. Edit times, we'll do this one. And then if we hit our attribute down here, say position specifically, I've hit position, and now if I look at my display here, I've got all the different times for the different stuff. I can set it directly for channel. I can set it for position. I can set it for intensity. Actually, apparently that playback doesn't have any position in it. I just got color and gobo. So you set different times for them as a whole, or I can do single channels. So just pan or just tilt along those lines. I hope that's making sense to everyone. I should have picked a better playback for that. Let's see. Let me find the better playback for this one. Include you. Yeah, that's the one I want to use. So we'll hit clear on that. So edit times on you. And then we'll do group attribute times. And now we can see if I wanted to mess about with the intensity ones, I can scroll over to intensity. And like I said, it's fade in, or I can do single and set it to the shutter or the dimmer. Or if we go to position, I can set the pan and the tilt, or just pan or just tilt, to give them the different times so they fade in differently. Yes, thanks, Randall. It is a drink. Hope this makes sense with the group of tribute times. Really handy again to have it fade in. Have your dimmer come up quickly, but the movement take longer, or the color take even longer than that, or whatever makes you happy. Some really neat and interesting looking effects for just a simple scene playback like that. So let's talk about mode 2, since everyone's kind of doing it anyways. Then we'll get into our fader modes here, and I'll actually explain to you guys. I said I usually do this the opposite way. I usually do edit times and then playback options, but if I did it, we did it backwards for today's class. So mode 0 obeys the set fade in time and will always be a manually controlled fade out determined by the speed at which the fader is brought down. So if you have your playback in mode 0 and you have a fade in of 5 seconds, no matter how fast you bring that fader up, it's going to take 5 seconds to fade in. You can slap it all the way up and it's going to still take 5 seconds. However fast you bring the fader down is how fast it fades out. So if you move it slow, it's going to fade out slowly. Mode 1 obeys both the fade in and fade out times. So again, our same example. So we have a fade in of 5 seconds and a fade out of 5 seconds, and our playback set to mode 1. No matter how fast we move that fader up or down, it's going to take 5 seconds to fade in and 5 seconds to fade out. Mode 2, I will come back to it in 1 second. Let's just get mode 3 out of the way real quick. Mode 3 crossfades all of the playbacks out in the time this playback fades in. Mode 3 is the only mode which forces other HTTP channels to off. That's not exactly true anymore after version 11 and crossfade HTTP, like we talked about earlier. That now is more true for mode 3. I usually use mode 3 playbacks for like my like a video roll. Sorry about that, where I want the I want everything to fade to that video look, so that nice little, real light glow on stage and everything else dark so they can see, nicely see the video. Stuff like that's generally what I use mode 3 for. So let's step back and talk about mode 2 since everyone wants to anyways. Mode 2, sorry here. Mode 2, all channels controlled by the fader, including LTP channels, instant LTP channels such as the color wheel or a gobo wheel, still snap. In this mode, all channels fade in and out on the fader, returning to where they started when the fader was fired. Now, why would that playback earlier I used would I want to use a release mask rather than a mode 2? What I've seen is that sometimes when I get a little happy, if you get a little too fast pressing buttons, I've seen mode 2 get lost and not remember that it needs to go back to, let's say in this case, not strobing. So you end up with your lights still strobing into no color because they got lost because you were hitting buttons a little too fast and mode 2 forgot where we were supposed to go back to. I've never gotten a release mask to stick. I've tried and have yet to get it to do it. So I've always found that for that, using a release mask works out better. Now, times that I used mode 2 in general nowadays, when I would use mode 2, would be say that I wanted a playback that as I brought the fader up, the fixture panned from left stage to stage right, so that as I bring it up, the fixture will start panning across the stage. If I stop moving the fader, the fixture stops. As I pull the fader back down, it goes back to where it was before. I've used that as a way for mode 2, or just sometimes I want things to go back to how they were. But I'm not going to be flashing and trashing it around. Again, I find that a release mask is a lot better than mode 2, and I'm having a complete brain fart out where I cannot remember another spot that I've used mode 2 for. Recently, I've kind of more just usually use release mask way more than mode 2 anymore. Honestly, Nigel brought up the exact situation of why using release mask is better than mode 2, because if I use the release mask, I've never seen it get stuck, where I can do it almost regularly with a mode 2 fader. fixture order again, fixture order, fixture overlap, just like we actually we'll just talk about it because it's in the slide again. Fixture order sets how shapes and overlap behave for this playback. Fixtures can't have the same order number, just like we saw in our other sections, and maybe we'll actually play with that. Actually, let's just go ahead and play with that. It's not like we don't have time, right? So if we are to we'll say we'll take this playback, so what I think it is, yes it is, and we'll do our edit times here, and we'll give it a fade time of 3 seconds. Whoops. Fade time of 3 seconds. And then we'll go to our fixture overlap, and we'll set our overlap to 50. Hit enter. Whoops. Didn't mean to exit out of that. Then we change our fixture order. So instead of having 1 through 10, if we did it 1 through 10, if we we'll drop that fader and we'll fire this one so it's in a different look, and we'll unfire it. Then we'll raise this one up. Whoops, wrong one. I'll raise this one up. We can see that it fades in across our line 1 through 10 like our fixture order was. Now if I go into edit times again, I also do it through playback options, and then go to fixture order and change it to 1, 1, and 1, and we turn on auto increment so make it a little faster. 2, whoops, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And then I exit out of here. I really turn this playback off, turn this one on, so the lights are pointing at a different spot. So now when I fire this playback, we can see that it starts from the outside and goes to the inside, just like we had seen before. And I didn't have the dang one up the entire time. Doggone it. What? Oh, golly gee willikers. I think I need to start drinking. Yeah, get the bottles open, definitely, boys. It took me way too long to look over there and notice this. So I'm going to set this one back to how it was real quick. So edit times here. Set our speed to our fade to 0. Why did I hit enter? Then we'll go into our fixture order and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and we hit exit. So now, if we go to another playback here, actually go to this one so it's not pointing the same place, and we fire this playback, we see that our fixtures come in as quickly as possible and go to those different positions. So we'll flash this one in. Now we'll do edit times, select this playback. We'll give it a fade time of 3 seconds. And then we'll go to our fixture overlap and we'll leave it at 50. Then we'll go to our fixture order and we see that we have it 1 through 10, right? So we exit out of here. Now if we fire this playback, we can see in 3 seconds it fades in across it, moving from left to right, since that's the exact same as our fixture order was. So we'll go ahead and turn this playback off, flash that one in just so they're doing something different. And then we do edit times and we select this playback and we go to fixture order. Instead of having 1 through 10, we make it 1's on the outside, 5's in the middle. So we'll leave our auto increment on to make it a little bit faster. So we'll set 1 here, 2 here, 3 here, 4 here, and 5 here. Then we'll exit out. So now, make sure they're doing something else. Now we fire this one in. We'll see that it comes in from the outside to the inside in that same 3 second fade time with the 50% overlap. So if you live like that for a long time, is that one drink or does that have to be multiple drinks at that point? Remember, our fixture overlap means 100% means they all fade at the same time together. 50% overlap means when the first fixture reaches 50%, the next in the fixture order will start its fade, and then the third, once the second one gets to 50%, so on and so forth down the line. And the fade will happen over the time that you, over the fade-in time to finish in that time. So if we set 3 seconds, it'll take the 3 seconds to do across the entire fade. So let's talk about channel grid real quick, unless there's actually any questions on the edit times menu. Yeah, as I like to say, Nigel, fixture order applies to everything in the console. It has so much effect that fixture order matters. You completely change an effect just by changing the fixture order of the fixtures or playback, just like we did there. You know, we completely changed the look of that playback by just changing its fixture order very quickly. Show us how to set one time for movement and another for fade in. Okay, Randall, actually, we'll do that before we go to channel grid. Let's do that instead. Channel grid is kind of boring. So let's do that real quick. Yes, as we've been doing it through edit times there, Sam. But to show Randall, let's do the separate movement times. So let's go ahead and do our edit times, and we'll select this playback here. And we'll go into our group attribute times. We can either do it here or just while we're here, we can just click it here, go and click on position. And we'll set our fade in for our position to 5 seconds. And we'll do our color. And we'll do our color in, I'll make it 10 so it's pretty obvious. It's a forever long fade time. But you guys will see it and it'll make sense. So now we'll go ahead and hit exit on this. We'll go ahead and unfire this playback and fire this one so they're a different color, position, and gobo. So now, oops, I have this all the way down. Now when we fire back this one, we can see that it faded in the original time, but we see that our color is taking the 10 seconds to fade in, and our position only took 5 seconds to get to each one. Does that make sense there now? Or look good there, Randall, for what you were asking? I believe so, Corey. So we'll do it again. We'll do edit times here, and we'll set our color fade in to, why did you say that? We want you to be 3, and we're on color, right? So we'll change it to 1. Enter. So it's not a 1 second fade in on color. Really? Let's choose this game because I don't think it has done what I have asked it to do. We only need cyan and yellow anyways. So we'll hit 1, enter, and then exit it out. So now if we drop this playback, flash this one in, and erase this playback, we can see the color comes in as quickly as possible on each fixture in the order. Does that make sense? Might be easier on this one to turn off from fixture overlap also. So let's just turn fixture overlap off. That's back to 100. Might be a little easier to see that now. Flash this one in. See how the color, how it faded in, the color faded in almost instantly. Whereas the dimmer, set this to mode 1. And let's hit our fade out too. We'll make our fade in 5 and our fade out 5. And then, oops, why did I close that? Let's get it on something else here. All right, now. Oops, did not go. Oh, because I wasn't down all the way. So now if I bring this up, we can see that the color faded in quickly, but everything else took the 5 seconds that we gave on the fade in. Is that working now, Corey? Looks like you said thanks, so I'll take yes. Juan, I'm not quite sure what you mean. Try asking again. Nigel, you can set that in a queue list also. Yes, I think Sam picked up what you meant, which what I was thinking is what you meant, but I wasn't sure. So let's just talk about channel grid real quick so we can get it out of the way, and then we'll just go back to poking at questions. Nigel, remind me when we're doing queue lists on Monday, and we can do the group attribute times in a queue list, but it works just the same. So let's talk about channel grid real quick here. Shows what's going on. It's useful during programming. So if we go back to our Titan screen and we do open workspace window, and then we find channel grid, channel grid here, it's on SoftKey. I can look through here. I can see everything that's going on in my console. I can narrow it down by fixture type. I can have it be just the dimmers, just the BMFLs, or just those LED battens we've got there chilling in the back. We'll leave it on BMFLs for right now, and we see that we've got all our channels and what each one is at. Now, if we look in our context menu, again, on the Titan Go or the Sapphire Touch, it's going to be the 4 lines button. On all the other consoles, it's going to be right here just to the right of SoftKeys B, C, and D. Just to the left of SoftKeys B, C, and D was where the context menu will be. But if we click on that, we can see, we can set it to show all the stage, just with the stage, because everything's actually going out, just what's in the programmer or just what fixtures you have selected. We can set it to sort it by user number or last time you selected the fixture. We can open up the intensity view from here, which we'll talk about on another day. We can hide palettes or view palettes, so we can see that. So we can get out of the way. You can see that the playback that is currently up and firing the fixtures are using that color palette as their palette. And that's kind of handy. Oops, wrong button to have her not. Playback, so you can have it show just what playback is controlling which fixture. In this case, Q5 is currently controlling our fixtures. Levels, we can just see what the actual level is. If we turn off, if we hide the playbacks, we can see that our dimmers are at 100%. Our pan and tilt are at these values. Our color functions are at these. Our cyan, magenta, and yellow have those values. So forth down the line. You can see what the value is for everything in this playback. If we had any shapes in there, we could view the shapes. We don't have any on this particular playback. Same with the other effects. If we had any running, we could see them, and time. So we can also get into the edit times here and set our individual fade and delay times per channel through this view also, if we wanted to. So we could change our, see here, we'll change our tilts fade on, we'll do it on all the fixtures. Oops, come on, there we go. Set it to 20 seconds, hit enter, and then that's in our programmer. So we record here and merge it. Now when we hit clear, we close this, so you can see our fixtures, we turn it off. Wait for it to fade out since I put a forever long fade out time on it. Flash this one in, and now fire this playback, and we can see that our tilt value is taking forever to move because we set that speed to extremely slow because that was a forever long fade. You can see that it's changed the fade time there by putting it in the programmer and then recording and merging it. Does that make sense to everyone? So we're a little over our usual hour for this one, but that is a-okay. I'd rather answer you guys' questions and help you out rather than have you not have something answered. So any other questions or anything that pertains to playbacks, playback options, or edit times for a single playback, we'll talk about cue lists and whatnot on another day. Oh, that's rough, my brother. That's rough. Oh. Hey, not bad. Hey, I had no mistakes yesterday, so you know what, one day at a time. I'm getting better and then worse and then hopefully better again. I don't know. We'll get it figured out here at some point. I get so excited to show you guys stuff, I forget to look at the stream deck and hit the button. Are times adjustable via the console hard keys? Yes, Corey. As if you see what Sam posted a few minutes ago in response to Juan, we can do timing syntax. I absolutely hate syntax, but we will do it anyways. I'm just not a syntax guy, and I absolutely hate it, but that's okay. So if we switch back to our mobile display here, and we say that we wanted to, in our programmer, put in, let's let these be invalid, so we can do time, and then do set our fade in of 5 seconds. And then when we recorded things, it would put it in. We could also get to our group attribute times. We can talk about with our fixture overlap or flash in and fade outs right here also. We can also do the full-on syntax typing like Sam showed a minute ago, and I'm having a complete brain fart on where to do stuff. So I did, if I hit the time button and then the fixture button, I can, hit these, then and we see down here on our where our workspaces usually be, it has all this stuff here, so you can get some examples of what to do. We can do if we typed time 5, we then have 5 seconds of a cue in the programmer. And all these ones through here, I'm sorry, I probably do this one another day because I'm just out of practice on it and absolutely suck at doing it. Unless Sam's got some brighter ones to throw out here quickly to make it a little better. Actually, yeah, why don't we just do that another day, Corey? As I'm just having a brain farty to fart on it, and I am terrible at syntax timing. It's probably my weakest point in all of Titan is doing that. But with that, since we don't really have any questions, and I'm getting multiple calls on our U.S. support line, so they're probably annoyed and wondering why I'm not answering them. So I think I'm going to go ahead and end the stream for here today, and maybe we'll just do a short one on syntax timing, or we can drag Sam and Gordon in, and they can do it a lot better than I can to make it much better than I do. Again, probably my least favorite part of Titan and just suck at it is syntax typing. So with that, again, I thank everyone for joining us. Don't forget, we can find what we're doing in our classes through here, the avolites.us/training events, so we can keep up on the schedule we have for here. And we're doing, tomorrow will be Wednesday. We're going to do chases and BPM masters tomorrow. Also, you can find the online at avolites.com/online resources for the other classes that are being held by our head trainers in the UK for AI and Titan. And let's put both those up on the screen at the same time. We've got our online resources and our U.S. Training events. And once we get back to having actual travel, we'll put up our in-person classes up on the U.S. Site again. So thank you, everybody, for coming out. And we will see you again tomorrow. And we'll do Chases and BPM Masters, which are always a good time. Thanks, and have a great day, guys and gals, if there's any of you out there.